Well, to start off, like the basics, the seminar is actually based upon the 7 basic principles, which he has outlined as like the basic principles of life. So what he did was he tried to take the Bible and turn it into this like, the basic principles included authority, responsibility, suffering, or ownership. Bill was not like at all qualified to be giving life advice to anyone. He did not have the credentials to do this, but he decided to anyway. So he develops this seminar called the Basic Seminar, which is the most basic of all of them that you go through. It's like your foot in the door. Everyone that joins the ATI or the IBLP will go through the Basic Seminar first. People that join this don't join because they think they're joining a cult. They are usually told, it's going to offer you tips on how to be a better person. The Basic Seminar is really creepy. I've actually watched almost all of it. Bill Gothard hates rock music. He's really against he is into biblical discipline, meaning corporal punishment. He talks a lot about the umbrella of authority, meaning that he believes that like the world of the family exists under an umbrella. And so the umbrella concept, I don't believe was actually something he developed. I think it's something that's existed, but this is his sort of point that all of these families exist under. There's an umbrella on the top, which is God. And then the umbrella underneath is the man, okay? And the man has the full authority of the umbrella underneath him, which is the wife. And then the umbrella underneath her is the children and the home, okay? So even though the woman is under the authority has the authority over her children, the ultimate authority goes to the father. And the father is placed in a position of authority where he is next to God. And so he's the one through the family that has the direct relationship to God, and he's designated with all of the responsibilities of leading the family, but they take it to an extreme step. So when you start listening to the Basic Seminar, which by the way is like hours upon hours, but anyways, he will start talking and breaking down how if you get out from underneath the umbrella of authority, you are basically going to ruin the family. Now, because the father has an umbrella, he can never step out of authority. So nothing that the father does will ever get him in trouble. But if a wife doesn't obey a husband, she would be accused of going out from under her umbrella. And if she goes out from under her umbrella, she is then accused of being akin to witchcraft. Because if you don't obey your authority, you're rebelling. And rebellion is Bill Gothard's number one thing he hates. He hates rebellion. He thinks rebellion is akin to witchcraft. So if you are rebelling against your authority, you are basically hanging out with Satan. And if you're hanging out with Satan, then you're going to go to hell. And everything that you do while you're underneath and outside of that authority will blow up the family and make it worse. So it's a fear tactic that he uses to make women feel like they have to stay under their husband's authority. Otherwise, their lives will be ruined. And everything within that structure basically all comes back to control. So everything can be blamed on everyone but the authority. So because the patriarch has unlimited authority, he can basically blame everything that happens on someone else. So here's an example. If a husband cheats on his wife, a common teaching that they will speak about, and Jenny Speed actually has articles on the IBLP, and she's passed away now, but she wrote articles about how if your husband cheats on you, it's generally because you're not fulfilling a need within him. So he has needs, and if you didn't keep yourself looking like thin, and you weren't giving him sex all the time, and didn't keep a clean house, and you weren't being hospitable, there's a million different reasons why they'll blame a woman, but it all comes underneath that authority. So he, under that authority, has no one that he actually has to, he's accountable to no one. I mean, he should be accountable to his pastors, but again, his pastors will just defer to his authority being himself and God. And so if the husband doesn't believe that he's done anything wrong, he will then blame the wife. And the power structure of this organization basically becomes a system of a man that's in a patriarchal role that then has all of the unlimited power and no balances, no checks, and everyone else is to blame. And if anyone goes out from under his authority, they're going to hell. So that's a very high level of it. Obviously, it's a lot more complex, but the basic seminar lays out those principles, and it lays out the umbrella of authority, and it lays out like how they believe marriages should be and how you should raise kids and all of that. Then you can go into what's called the advanced seminar, which is after you've gone through the full basic seminar, they will try to rope you in to the advanced seminar, which is basically expanding upon further things. And there's actually in the advanced seminar more to do with actual like discipline of children and that kind of stuff. So he basically takes, what he does that really fools people is that he takes passages from the Bible and he weaves it into everything so people feel like they're reading something that's biblical. But he takes scripture out of context and completely destroys it, and he doesn't actually apply it in a way that makes sense. And then he also he bastardizes the Bible. So he'll take a line that means something completely different in the Bible, but he will say that it means something else. He also, as another method of what he does, is he developed what's called the ATI. So the ATI is their homeschooling. So this is really where it took off for Bill and for the IBLP. Some people didn't homeschool, but the vast majority that got into this came in through the ATI, which was for the curriculum for the kids. So it was Christian moms that were at home that were looking for some like online or homeschooling education before the advent of the internet. And the ATI was pushed as like the all-inclusive, complete educational system for children, and a lot of people within the world started promoting it. So the ATI is curriculum, and I'm going to say this loosely, that uses teachings of Jesus Christ, and then he builds on fundamental things of education, okay? So what they actually offer are what are called wisdom books. And the ATI does not believe in grades. So they don't believe that having age-appropriate learning is how you learn. They believe that all kids can learn at the same level regardless of their age. And so their structure is that you have 59 wisdom booklets, and you basically start the wisdom booklets wherever you're at. So you initially start it with your first child, and you start on wisdom book 1. But say you have another child that comes up, and these families are huge. They often have like 10, 15 kids. So say you're on wisdom book 4, right? But you have a new 5-year-old that's going to start kindergarten. Instead of starting at wisdom book number 1, you're starting at wisdom book 24 with your 5-year-old. So they go in wisdom books one by one by one. And this is what they look like. These all come from Homeschoolers Anonymous. In this one, you can see that they talk about lust and marriage. This is their basic sex ed one. But then you can see how it's all broken down to like linguistics and history. And there's science and law and medicine, okay? Now, the problem with this is that the history is wrong, the science is wrong, the math is wrong, the linguistics are wrong. Basically, everything they taught kids is wrong. And kids, through their linguistics, learned definitions of words that weren't the actual definitions because Bill changed what he believed the words meant. So the kids would learn something like slander, and Bill decided that slander meant the truth. Well, the truth is that Bill didn't want people in his cult to speak negatively about anyone. And so what he did was he created a definition for slander that fit his characteristic of what he wanted no one to do, and that was to tell on each other. So they're not supposed to ever give a negative report of anyone. Telling on someone is like the worst thing in the world. And so he decided that he was going to tell people that slander meant that you're literally talking about the truth in a means to hurt someone. So people believe that if you speak about what it is that you think or feel about someone else, or you make a report, you're slandering them. But slander is not that. Slander is actually a lie and spreading a lie through written word. I believe libel is actually like spoken. One of them or the other. Anyways, so they believe, and that's just like one example. They have a whole list of character qualities that they also teach kids, which again take a word, and then Bill turns the definition into something totally different. And what happens is that the cult then has their own language. So what ends up happening is that people start speaking in a language that it's using all of the same words that you and I know, but they have a totally different definition for what those words mean. So you hear them, like the Duggars will say, I purposed to do something. Like they always say that, I purposed. Or, they use like these weird, like, the fruits of the spirit. And, they talk about their character qualities all the time. That's from Bill Gothard's teachings. So what happened is that he opens up training centers where kids can go and get help for their different rebellions. They offer programs for like financial freedom, and they're really into using no debt, having no debt, no life insurance, give everything to God, don't buy anything unless you have any money for it. And so what ends up happening is that everyone will go through the financial freedom seminar, which is the one big thing that Jim Bob Duggar was like really into. That's really what got him like gung-ho in this, is because he didn't want to be in debt. So he gets gung-ho into it through the financial freedom seminar, but he was not introduced to it through the financial freedom seminar. His mother introduced it to him when he was a teenager because of those seminars I told you about that he introduced to rebellious teenagers. So Mary sent Deanna and Jim Bob to these seminars. So he was already aware of the IBLP before he went gung-ho into it. And that's how it happens for everyone. If you look at the history, more than 2.5 million people went through the basic seminar. And I'm sure more than that. I mean, I don't even know when the last numbers were updated, but millions of people have gone through this. And then because it was so popular, and they infiltrated a lot of the evangelical churches, and it's not just in the Baptist churches. The IBLP spread into Pentecostal churches, just regular like evangelical free churches. They weren't just isolated to the Baptists, but the Baptist churches as a whole ended up sort of identifying it the most. So you see it the most in the Baptist churches for whatever reason. And it's generally something that's accepted by the Christian fundamentalist. So the people that are in this world are not people that are on the mainstream, every run-of-the-mill religion. They're not going to your basic Lutheran church or your basic Methodist church or your mainstream, I don't even know, like Baptist church. Because there's plenty of Baptist churches that don't do this at all. Okay? So, but they seemed to get a stakehold into the southern churches, particularly like in Arkansas, where they had looser regulations around homeschooling, and where there was just more like the Bible Belt. Obviously, you can exploit the areas and the pockets of America that have the highest populations of religion. So he has this organization that he has built around what his thoughts are about the Bible, what his goals are in life, and he builds the organization so that he cannot ever be kicked out, and he builds it so that no one can ever hold him accountable. Bill had a company that actually failed before he started this company, and he didn't want that to happen again. And so when he made the IBLP, he wanted to put into place a structure that would protect him from ever getting in trouble and not having any accountability. But the way that it was structured and the unlimited power it afforded to Bill, who was the ultimate patriarch, who, by the way, had no children and was never married, was littered and ripe with sexual abuse because of the way that it was taught, the way that women were property, and just the unlimited power it gave to men. So in the 1980s, his brother got caught like having an affair with like 6 women, and he covered that up. He almost lost his job, but then he didn't. And then as they grew, they started amassing tons and tons of property. The Green family from the Hobby Lobby donated tons of property to them. So the Big Sandy property where they have the Alert Academy, that actually was donated by the Green family of the Hobby Lobby. So if you ever wonder why the Duggars are obsessed with Hobby Lobby, it's because the Green family was a part of the IBLP. I don't know if they are anymore, but they were at one time. Mike Huckabee was in the IBLP as well. That's why the Duggars are like friends with Mike Huckabee. So basically, long story short, they start expanding and offering all these different training centers. They have to have people that are employed there. And so what Bill does is he has kids working for him for free. And people are sent to the training centers where they work, or they're sent to the training centers because they're bad and they go through horrific abuse at the training centers. The most horrible training center I've been told was the one that was in Indianapolis. There was a specific leader there, last name starts with a G, that was terrible. I've talked to a bunch of people that said that the abuse at the Indianapolis training center was the worst. But the training centers were to help rebellious kids, basically. On top of that, they had to have people that worked there. But they didn't want to pay people. So they basically just paid very low wages or nothing at all. And sometimes kids would be sent to work for Bill as an intern. And so he would get free labor. Well, the problem was that he also got unlimited access to kids. And a lot of those kids grew up, and then in 2011, 12, 13, and 14, they start sharing their stories, and they all realize as they're leaving the cult, because that's what it became by that point, that Bill Gothard maybe kind of sexually harassed or assaulted them too. And when they tried to report it, nobody helped them. So the Recovering Grace website was created, and a bunch of people that formerly worked for the ATI and for the IBLP started sharing their stories. Some of them shared them anonymously, and then some of them actually put their name out. The stories ranged from literally him just being really highly inappropriate, like grazing your his hands on your legs and playing footsie with you, to full-on rape, depending on who you were. And eventually they filed a lawsuit. Before they even filed the lawsuit, they brought their grievances to the board and to Bill. And I think ultimately what they wanted was accountability, and they wanted, changes to be made in the organization. They wanted Bill to face consequences. But unfortunately, that's not what happened. Bill ends up eventually stepping down when a lawsuit is filed and 34 people accuse him of sexual assault or rape. And the board does an investigation, and the investigation proves that nothing happened. But then they won't release the investigation to the people that were a part of it. They use things like it's an attorney-client privilege. And so all they're told is that there was no it was unsubstantiated claims. So eventually Bill is terminated and he leaves the cult, okay? And the people that were on the board, who were Tim Lewandowski, Payne, I think it's Gregory Payne, and Stephen Payne, and Gil Bates, had all been selected by Bill Gothard to be on his board because they were the most loyal to him. So Bill created and developed his board based on the people that he felt would be the most loyal to him and were loyal to the program and that wouldn't throw him under the bus. But when they themselves couldn't face the backlash anymore, they had to get rid of Bill if they wanted the IBLP to stay in existence. And then they started liquidating their assets, and they moved and they abandoned Chicago, which was their main headquarters, and they moved everything down to Texas, which a lot of people suspected was because they were trying to avoid statute of limitations and liability. So it didn't end up going anywhere. They withdrew the lawsuit, not because they didn't have valid claims. It was a complicated case to begin with. They had statute of limitation issues. I believe there was also issues with the lawyer because of the way that it was filed. My guess, and this is just my guess, is that the lawyer may have been working on a contingency based on damages. And then the IBLP was trying to claim that they didn't have any money, and again, trying to liquidate all their assets. So it would have been really expensive for them, and they might not have gotten any money out of it. And so attorneys don't work for free. I think I read that somewhere. If I got that wrong and you were part of the lawsuit, I apologize. So I have spoken to quite a few of the people that were on the lawsuit, and it was an incredibly challenging period of time for them, and they're currently working on some things to have their story heard on a more broad level. And so you'll learn more about these people hopefully soon. I believe they're working on some sort of documentary. I don't really know the full details, but the goal, I think, is to make this a more widely known story. So the IBLP as a whole doesn't exist in the same way as it did before the scandal with Bill Gothard, but they haven't abandoned any of his teachings. But the most loyal people stayed within this group, which happened to be the Duggars and the Bates. So a lot of people fled after Bill Gothard was sort of exposed as being a sexual predator. They wanted nothing to do with the ministry. The most devoted and devout Gothardites, they stayed. And the only logical explanation that I can think of as why they would stay, even though their leader has been gone, is that these people just really truly didn't want to let go of the belief system. And so instead of recognizing that the belief system was flawed because of who created it, because Gothard existed and was able to do what he did because of the structure of all of his curriculum. It protected him and it protected men that were predators. And because of the way that he structured everything, men had unlimited power and could do whatever they want with no consequence. Well, the most devout, narcissistic, abusive men, they don't want to let go of that power. And so instead of wanting to let go of that, they're going to explain it as he's a fallen individual and he's an imperfect man. It's not the fault of the teachings, it's the fault of the man. But you can't divorce the teachings from Gothard because it's his brainchild. It's not biblical. It uses the Bible and people are fooled. But because of the way that it is integrated into their lives through education, through seminars, and through homeschooling, this seeps into all aspects of their lives. And the IBLP tells people how to live their lives, from what to wear, what to eat. You can't eat pork. You aren't supposed to mix, I think, dairy and meats. I think that's why they always eat cheese pizzas. They are very, and if I got that wrong, I'm sorry. I know they don't eat pork because Gothard decided that it was unclean. They tell women to dress modestly. They have entire things about like what to avoid for what to wear, from like, let me just show you, like talking about eye traps and like why you shouldn't be wearing things in certain spots because it'll draw attention away from your shirt. So number 5, she has an eye trap on her chest, which draws attention to her breast. And so you wouldn't want to be wearing the eye trap. On the number 1, the eye trap would be her waist. It's a cinched waist and you can see her curves. Number 4, there's a slit, which again, a slit, it's basically ridiculous. But so that's where the modesty stuff comes from. And they came up with the most ridiculous, like, rules. I mean, even to the extent that he made decisions about how they wore their hair. I mean, how to get the best haircut for the style face you have. I mean, this is what they learned about in their wisdom books. So when you start to realize, like, they're learning bad education, and then in this they're also being taught that this is biblical, and then in that they're also being taught like you need to wear these certain clothes, because if you don't wear these certain clothes you're going to be a rebel, and if you're defrauding someone you might defile them. And defrauding, you don't ever want to defraud someone. If a woman ends up getting abused, don't worry, it's not going to be the fault of the abuser, because sexual abuse is handled through a worksheet counseling that's provided to individuals that go through it, that explains to them that it's the fault of the individual for tempting the person that abused them. And I don't actually have a copy of that right here. Sorry. So long story short, it weaves into every fabric of who these people are, and it's programmed into them from a young age. So leaving isn't as simple as, you can leave the group, but it's harder to leave the mindset. So you can leave and say, I don't want to be a part of this group anymore. But unraveling that mindset and unraveling all of the knowledge and the indoctrination and the wrong education that you received could take years, decades. I mean, these people in this world didn't learn math the way that you and I learned math. They learned the wrong vocabulary. They learned the wrong Bible. They learned the wrong everything. They learned the wrong history. It was all they literally learned the wrong medicine. So Bill's plan to help troubled teens turned into this weird cult where, even though it wasn't a church, it ends up becoming a church. And some churches, instead of actually having pastors, they just watch Bill's videos every Sunday or talk about whatever Bill's talking about. And that's what becomes their church. And that's what the Duggars did. So when the Duggars were really heavily into this, instead of having pastors, they just watched seminar videos and they talked about the ATI stuff or whatever was happening in the seminars. That's like that church that they were involved in where Josh was sexually abusing kids, or that's when that time frame happened. That's what they were doing. They were literally watching Gothard videos. That was the church. So some people, instead of looking at this as a set of tools, looked at this as a religion. So it's not Christianity. It's not even Baptist. It's Gothardism. I hope that makes sense. So when we're talking about this, we're not talking about Christianity, because it's not Christianity. It takes Christian principles and Bible verses, but it's no different than what Jim Jones did with his People's Temple, or anybody that takes any part of Christianity and makes it their own and twists it. And he took it a step further by writing books and making seminars and doing the education. So this is not actually curriculum, or this is not actually Christianity. It's Gothardism. So I hope that makes sense. And they haven't abandoned any of the teachings. So if you go to the IVLP website, even though they hate Gothard now, all of the seminars have Gothard in the videos. And all of Gothard books are still actually available for sale. And last year, Bill Gothard tried to sue the IBLP because he wanted his company back, because he says he's the rightful owner of the material that they're using. I don't think that went very well for Bill. Bill is in his, like, I don't even know, he's like 87 or 88. He's old. And, but he's still like, he still lurks in the background. And even though they separate from Bill, they won't separate from the beliefs. And once you, even though the organization isn't powerful, because all of those millions of people went through these seminars, some parts of that seminar and those belief systems have infiltrated other sects. So the IFB has taken aspects of Gothardism and applied the umbrella of authority. So a lot of independent fundamentalist Baptist churches follow some of the principles, and they also sort of follow the quiverful independent fundamentalist world. Even though they aren't in the IBLP, they've integrated it into their world. And that's why you see the overlap with people that aren't from the IBLP. And then you just have interloping grifters like Debbie and Michael Pearl, who weren't really in the IBLP either, but they exploited the IBLP with their books on discipline, marital submission, and all of that. And then other grifters join and start wanting to profit off of it. And it basically ends up being a bunch of people that really just turned religion into a for-profit world. And then it ruined people's lives. So that's the, that's the skinny. I hope this was a good understanding of the IBLP. I don't want to, and if I got parts of it wrong, I apologize. I was trying to just, it's easy for people that are Christian to feel like you're attacking Christianity because you hear Gil Bates preaching and you're like, well, but he's at a church. Well, he's really preaching the teachings of Gothard, but he's in a Baptist church. Bill was not married and he was never a father. I hope that helped. Yes, Bill was never married. recoveringgrace.org. Yes, so great summary for starters. You left and it's hard to break free, but emotionally, mentally, I feel like it will take me forever. I know that the no dairy and meat and no pork is a Jewish belief, but Bill doesn't eat pork either. Like, that's in their wisdom books. They don't eat pork. So Gil Bates is still on the board of the IBLP. So how involved in them? He's the leader. There's 3 leaders. The president is Tim Lewandowski. And then there's Stephen Payne, who is Chad's dad. Is it Stephen? I think. Or Greg. I don't know. Chad Payne's dad, Aaron's husband, is on the board, and so is Gil Bates. You explained that perfectly. So let's just say that Gil Bates preaches a lot of things that he doesn't practice. And, but the kids don't, they still have like the core beliefs that Gil has are IBLP. So you cannot separate Gil from the IBLP. You can't. He is on the board. You can't. You literally cannot. And you can't separate Gil from the irreparable harm he caused to the victims of Bill Gothard because he covered up Bill's crimes. So Jim Bob Duggar covered up Josh Duggar's crimes. Gil Bates and the board covered up Bill Gothard's crimes. Do you see what I'm saying? So you can't separate it. I've never heard any allegations, but if you are covering up someone's crimes that is sexually abusing somebody else, you know, you're culpable indirectly, in my opinion. No, they're nonprofits. So, you know, the victims of Bill Gothard, well, like, the victims of Bill Gothard will say to them that Gil Bates, through his work with the board, harmed me. So they will say, I was harmed by him covering up from Bill. So you can't discount that. To some of these people, they directly believe and feel and know that the board covered for Bill. Nobody will believe this. Okay, that's not true. That's not true. So that's kind of the long of the short. And you can't separate the Bates from this because they're actively recruiting for the cults through their show, and he still teaches what they say. People have spoken out. The victims and the survivors have podcasts, they have websites, they have lots of voices that are loud and speaking out. I have offered my platform to many, but a lot of these people, they face massive backlash, smearing, and shunning, and fear and intimidation. So I can't force anyone to share. I've had people on my channel that have shared. Most people that I speak to just want confidentiality. Yeah, there's Thriving Forward. There's the Village Dauntless's podcast, Recovering Grace. So I can't think off the top of my head. I'm sorry. Anyway, no, only Jill and Ginger have left the IBLP. Everyone else is still in. Preacher Boy doesn't specifically do the IBLP though, and I don't know. He wasn't IBLP. He was IFB, not the same. No, the Bates have not left. The Bates are on the board. John David is still very much involved in the cult. They all are. All the boys are. None of them have left. Okay, so I'm going to go. I don't want to be too long on here. Yeah, this is true. Crystal said, even if they're not in the IBLP, it doesn't mean that they wouldn't be following their ingrained teachings. So, yes, Abby, John's wife, is from the IBLP. Like, Lauren Swanson is from the IBLP. The only boys that were not IBLP were Derek Dillard and Jeremy Volo. The Seawalds were not IBLP, but Ben Seawald, I think from Jim Bob's standpoint, was very moldable and controllable. But the rest of the siblings have married, like Katie Nikatsu, Jed's wife, was from the IBLP, Lauren Swanson, Kendra Caldwell. Even though Kendra does stuff with like the conferences. So yeah. Okay. They are working on a documentary, which I just told you guys about, and they are always welcome to come onto my platform and share their stories. I don't have any problem with that. They are the ones that have to feel comfortable doing it. I can't force anyone to speak that isn't comfortable, and I can't force somebody else who might feel unsafe to speak. I give everyone the option. I invite people to speak. They don't want to speak publicly, the ones that I speak to. I have had Dauntless come on. I've had other people that have grown up in this world that I have spoken to and interviewed for you. That's the best I can do. I have an open invitation to people that want to, but many of them don't, and that's their choice. So that's the IBLP. Dauntless has been on my Instagram. She's been on my channel. Austin is in the IBLP. Yes, Joy and Austin are still in it. You can't force them to do anything, because the last thing a lot of these people, they've been controlled their whole life, and they get the people that I speak to are they don't want to be exploited, and they don't want to feel exploited. They don't want to be bullied. They don't want to be exposed. Speaking out puts them under the radar of all the people that are in the cult that will attack them. It's just for them, you know. Michelle can't do anything unless Jim Bob tells her to. So, yeah, you need to honor their autonomy. But there's a lot of them in comments. There's a lot of you watching right now. You don't have to go far if you read my comments. The survivors are there. They're telling you in the comments what's going on. They're sharing their stories in the comments. For some of them, a comment is easier than having their face exposed or their voice exposed. I know that Bates are still in the IBLP. You know, it's so hard, man. Like, I feel like the same questions get asked over and over and over again. Do people listen? Like, the Bates are in the IBLP. Yes, like, I'm not anybody's voice, you guys, and I want to be extremely clear. Okay, goodbye. This person's trying to say that because I'm educating people, I can't actually make a difference. No, that's not how it works. It's not my story to tell. All I can do is report on what I've learned and then what people tell me. I am not the victim of the IVLP. I'm not the survivor. All I can do is basically share with you what happens and what's going on. That's all I can do. But yes, it does make a difference because every day I get messages from people that are leaving, have left, are opening their eyes, are realizing that they don't have to stay. Not only that, it's created just through education, people feeling like they're seen, I guess. I don't know. But again, I'm not the voice for people because it's their story. I'm just sharing what I report. They all have their own voices. They all have their own stories. And those stories are up to them. You don't tell somebody else's, story unless they give you, especially with people that aren't famous, that aren't public figures, I'm going to respect their autonomy. I'll talk about what kind of people they are and what they're doing to my friend right now. I can't add you because this live is going to end in 2 seconds because I'm tired and I'm hungry. But that's what I have for right now. I'm not trying to be negative all the time. But again, people... All right, you guys, bye.